Hey everybody, Melissa Mackenzie, publisher of the American Spectator, joining me again, as always, Scott McKay of the Hayride and Reviver in Louisiana, and also contributing editor to the American Spectator. Scott, so we've been
Hola.
talking about your book about Barack Obama, but
Yeah.
we have to keep some secrets for our readers, but just know that this book is in the offing and that Scott McKay, intrepid reporter, is hunting down all the backstories of Barack Obama and his Marxist mother and father. And so, when can we expect this book, Scott?
I think spring or summer, maybe late spring is when this thing's going to be out. I'm kind of on the downhill slope of the first draft of it. And it's been kind of a slog because it's not a history book, but as writing it feels like a history book because I'm going back through a lot of things in that time from say 2005 to 2016, and a whole lot of it is really, really, really well, it's relevant to today because a lot of this, I mean, like what you're going to see in this book when you guys get a chance to read it is this is all about how Barack Obama has not gone away. Like, like it's like, okay, we had two terms of that guy and thank God it's not over. Okay. Like everything, we're reliving the 8 years of Barack Obama, only it's worse now because a lot of the things that were not corrected during the 4 years of Trump, which is not, I'm not blaming Trump for that, but like these people laid time bombs all through the government when Donald Trump was president. Okay. I mean, and I don't use this in the book yet, even though I'm thinking about it. Like if you've ever, read or watched the movie Dune, right? And House
Mm-hmm.
Atreides takes over Arrakis, and then they
Mm-hmm.
find out that there are booby traps and sabotage laid everywhere because
Everywhere.
Baron Harkonnen and his goons like left all this stuff. Well, guess what? Donald Trump is like Duke Leo Atreides in this metaphor, and Barack Obama is Baron Harkonnen. He's not a fat slob like Baron Harkonnen, but I mean, in terms of sabotaging the next president, it's a very apt metaphor.
Yeah, he likes he. The rumor is he likes bathhouses like Baron Harkonnen.
There's that.
I'm sorry, I couldn't resist.
It's
Allegedly.
interestingly enough, and I mean, I don't want to make this a podcast about Dune, but Frank Herbert was a screenwriter for Richard Nixon, and there was very much a sense when Nixon took over in January of 1969 that Lyndon Johnson had left time bombs everywhere in the government, and that like
Which he
that
did.
was, yeah, he did, and so that was sort of part of Frank Herbert's narrative in Dune is it's an analogy for what Nixon had to deal with. And
By the way, I'm like a Dune fanatic. I've read all of the books, even the ones Frank's kids have written, his son wrote, which
right,
are not at all very good, but
oh well,
they're still better than a lot of things. And I just it's just such a classic. I love the book. I'm happy that it's finally getting the treatment it deserves. I can't wait for part two.
did
So
did we have we talked about Jodorowsky's Dune, the documentary? Did we talk about that
I don't
in
think we've talked about it.
the
No.
previous? Okay, and I'm not sure. I saw this on, I think it was like either Showtime or Stars,
Hmm.
and they had this. It was this documentary, and this guy, I can't remember his first name. This guy's name is Jodorowsky, who was a kind of an art house film director, like in the late '60s, early '70s, who had, I guess he's a sort of like a David Lynch of his time or whatever,
Oh, okay.
and his stuff was kind of really groundbreaking, and it was a little weird. It was kind of
Mhm.
hippie type stuff, but he came to the attention of this French movie producer named Michael Seydoux, who like had a whole bunch of money behind him and all this kind of stuff. And the guy fell in love with Jodorowsky, and he comes to him and says, "Pick a project, any project, and let's go make a movie." And so this guy Jodorowsky says, "Dude," because that was the hot book,
Hmm.
right? And so the documentary is all about him trying to make this super unbelievably epic science fiction movie at a time when sci-fi movies were not, big budget, like
Right.
big deal type projects. I mean, we really, I mean, most of your sci-fi stuff was cheap, low budget,
Right.
and really kind of weak stuff.
Pre-Star Wars, really.
Yeah,
Anything
well, I'm
pre-Star Wars.
coming to this. So anyway, what's in this documentary is like he wants to do the first, like, truly first class production, sci-fi production, and he wanted to make Dune with it. Like they cast Mick Jagger as Fade Routha.
Oh, yeah.
Like Mick Jagger was on board with anyway, and he goes and he gets like all of the best, artists, sculptors, and everything to try to craft the vision of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And so they put all of this together and they bring it to Hollywood and they go see all of the big movie studios in Hollywood. And every one of them is like, nah, this is too big budget and sci-fi is not a thing, whatever. Like, the same myopia that Hollywood suffers from today.
Yeah.
And so like this whole thing falls apart on this guy. But everything that he put together, like, and recruited all these people to get this project off the ground, everybody kind of went their separate ways. And a lot of the art, cinematographers, artists, like people worked on Star Wars that were brought into sci-fi genre from this guy, Jodorowsky. And especially like all of the Aliens movies.
Oh, yeah.
All of that stuff. And like a lot of it, like they just said, oh, well, we did this for Dune. Let's do this for Aliens. Like all of that stuff came from it. It's absolutely fascinating documentary. The best part of it is, so like the Dune project ends up getting taken over. I think it was Dino De Laurentiis that ended up getting it. And he gave David Lynch the reins. Right. And so they talk to this guy, Jodorowsky, and he's like, and I don't know, this guy, he's like Polish, but he grew up in Spain, I think. Okay. And so like, just to tell you, they cast Goya, the artist, okay, as the emperor. The guy was like 80 years old, and he's like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. Like he wanted like a ridiculous amount of money. And they said, okay, fine, we'll do it. Anyway, so this guy is like Spanish or whatever. And so the movie comes out and it's David Lynch's Dune, right? And he goes, this guy's talking, he says, so I go to see this movie and it's terrible. It's terrible. And he's like laughing. He had enjoyed it. So he's like, it was so wonderful. They made my movie and it was terrible. They botched it. And I'm like laughing my ass off watching this guy's like, gleeful that this project that somebody else, took on.
Right.
And and he wasn't even apologetic about the fact. It's like, it makes him a bad person, but he's entitled, right? Because like this project he put together, which was ahead of its time, massively successful in an artistic sense in terms of everything that came from it, but it never got made, right? But like there's like a break in the timeline. Before this project came along, sci-fi movies were like the lowest rent thing you could do.
It's reflective to how most literary critics view sci-fi and fantasy literature. It just was lowbrow and considered a lesser form of art. And you'll still talk to people who will say that, even though, and this is, when we created the book list for, just so Spectator readers, we have a book list of your subscriber where you can go and look at books for children. And I was like, it's a crime that on these book lists that we have for kids at places do not have sci-fi, because so many of the sci-fi books are prescient and explain the moral conundrums of certain technology and are a really great jumping off point. Isaac Asimov, there's certain concepts that are not dealt with in regular literature, except for in a more kind of thematic or esoteric kind of overarching principle way. But the sci-fi books get into the if this, then this, type of, which is very helpful for young people because they're going to be living in this world. It's not going to be science fiction. It's going to be science reality. It is science reality now.
Yeah. You can hear this over and over and over again. Look at sci-fi and you'll see kind of where technology is going, because sci-fi writers are the ones who have, applied some brain power and projected this stuff out. Yeah. And come up with a vision of, okay, what's society going to look like in 50 years, 100 years, and so forth. And I mean, those are compelling stories, and it's only really been Hollywood in the aftermath of this guy, not succeeding but showing what was possible.
Right. And with actors and actresses that are have not been given their due, like female protagonists, like in Terminator, in well, I mean, yeah, even in Terminator. And
Well,
yeah.
I mean, Carrie Fisher in the Star, like especially the
Mhm.
early Star Wars movies, she was a fantastic female protagonist. I mean, she
Right.
really was, right? Like she was active. She wasn't, she wasn't exactly a damsel in distress,
No.
but it wasn't this like modern thing where, oh, the girl's got to beat up all the guys. Like there were things she couldn't do, and that was, kind of okay. And that, like they, when Jabba the Hutt has her, they go and they get her, right? And then she's able to get out of there on her own, but like she needed some help, and that's okay because Luke needed help, and so did Han Solo,
Right.
and like she, to a large measure, she was one of the gang. They don't even make that kind of stuff anymore. Like, I've seen a couple of episodes of this thing that HBO has got, this The Last of Us.
Oh yeah. I was going to
Which is,
wondered if we were going to talk about that.
yeah, and I'm not saying it's not good because the visuals in this thing, which
Are
so
thing.
so like so you haven't watched it. Basically, the deal is, what's the name of the cordyceps, which is this fungus that like it's actually frightening as hell, in nature now, will actually infect animals,
Specifically
lower orders of species like wasps and things like that,
ants.
ants, and
Yeah.
basically turn them into mutants. And like the fungus basically takes them over. Okay, but cordyceps is like inert in humans. Well, the first episode of this thing starts with, it's 1968, and these academics are on some talk show, and they're talking about, you know, uh, viruses and how does, like, what are the major threats to mankind? And this guy goes, I'm not worried about viruses. I'm not worried about pandemics. Those things always peter out, blah, blah, blah. He says, what I'm worried about is fungus. Right. And so he goes in and he starts talking about cordyceps, which is like, okay, so this is the thing. And in 2003, the way this thing is set up is I guess it starts in Indonesia. Um, Cordyceps fungus, in some way, shape, matter, or form, is able to mutate to the point where it does infect humans. And now you get like the World War Z scenario, and the
Okay.
whole world falls apart. And this takes place basically, it's 2023, 20 years after this thing happens, and their society's done. It's finished. Like there's like a little, section of Boston that they call the QZ, which I guess is quarantine zone, that people are crammed into because everything outside of this cordoned off section is the fungus people who like eat you, right? Or they don't even eat you; they bite you, and then by biting you, the spores of the fungus get in you, and then you turn into a fungus person, right? And so, like, but the long and short of it is
Fungus person. It sounds so funny, but the
the
thing is, it's
fungus
like,
among us.
well,
So
the thing is though, Scott, this, I guess the guys who created this, The Last of Us is a video game.
it was a video game that they've turned into a TV series. Yeah.
Right, but they created it watching, and I watched this over the break with my family, and it was a National Geographic special, and my brother and sister-in-law are like, "What are we watching? We're supposed to." I thought we were watching this beautiful National Geographic thing. We see this ant gets taken over by this fungus. First off, it's terrifying.
Oh,
What
it's
happens?
gross.
It goes a little
So
like it stops following the line of the other ants, and it kind of goes off and starts twitching like an actual like zombie, and then it just freezes because the thing has taken, it's literally eating its brain. The fungus is eating its brain.
right.
Then it stops for long enough, and then it explodes out of its head, and out of the head of this thing, of this ant, grows this beautiful plant and flower, and then the flower throws off these spores to go get more ants. And the
Yes.
thing is, it's just like we were all sitting there watching it like, and this
Right.
is a National Geographic thing. And this is what the guys who created this, and this
Yeah.
is happening to humans. Okay, fun fact before you jump back in.
Right.
The reason why this isn't a reality in humans, my son informed me, is because this fungi can only survive at 94 degrees and below. Above 94 degrees, it dies.
Correct.
Humans, by the way, our average temperature is 98.6.
Correct.
However, I'm going to tell you guys something that scares the crap out of me. Human beings worldwide basal body temperature has been dropping. And it is now not 98.6, but about 97.9 is the average human temperature.
Mm-hmm.
And so above that means that our body will be susceptible to different, viruses, bacteria, and things because the heat of our body kills off certain bugs. And I'm like, I wonder how much our basal body temperature is going to have to drop so that something like this could actually happen. You can't know too much watching these things. You have to be able to suspend disbelief, but.
Well, okay, but they actually bridge that gap a little bit in the very beginning of the first episode of this, which is, so the egghead academic who's talking about this, there's two academics and the other guy is scoffing at him. Right. And that was exactly what he said. Oh, no. This is, they're inert above 94 degrees. And the guy said, yeah, well, let's say the planet warms and the effect of that is that, all of the organisms out there will mutate and adjust to the warming of the planet, right? So now they've checked that box, so you get the global warming piece that's going to turn us into fungus people. Now, having said that, right. The reality is, if you get infected with something, your immune system's going to kick in and you're going to run a fever.
Right.
Okay. So if this thing can't survive above 94 degrees and 30, 50 years from now, whatever, people, have an internal body temperature of 94 degrees. So all of a sudden this is a viable thing. You get infected with this and your immune system's going to kick in and you're going to run a big fever and it'll kill it.
I'm going to say something here though. That is true of bacteria and viruses. Fungi are a lot more flexible. And so, for example, in our bodies, always, we have some fungal infections going.
Yeah.
And Candida, for example, survives just fine, but it is kept in check by our good bacteria in our system.
Right.
Now, I will say that a good fungus in our system can easily overgrowth if you're immune compromised. So immune compromised people, including those with like HIV, AIDS, in compromise and chemotherapy, they often die with fungal infections ultimately. So I say all that to say that fungal infections are a little bit different. They don't provoke the same kind of immune response because our body has to learn to live with them.
True. Although the fungal infections that you're talking about are nowhere near the same thing as like cordyceps.
Well, that's true. I mean, our body,
like you're much more likely to run a big fever if you got some kind of infection by that kind of invasive, nasty bug. Anyway, I don't want to get too bogged down in that. Anyway, the point is, so that HBO's got this series going, and it's like, okay, other than Pedro Pascal, who is the hero of the thing, and like he's going to take this girl somewhere out west, and the deal is that she some kind of way has immunity. Nobody has immunity to this. It's impossible to get immunity. She has immunity. Like she got bit by somebody and she got the fungal spores or whatever, and her body fought it off. And so that makes her like the most valuable commodity on earth, right?
Yeah.
And so the whole point is to try to get her to some lab somewhere where they're going to try to,
replicate
do something
her,
and synthesize her blood, or to come up with some sort of vaccine for this thing, and reclaim society, right? And so he's the guy who's going to be her protector and is going to bring her out there. everybody else, and this is a violent show, people getting killed left and right, whatever, like almost everybody else, they're all women, and they shoot guns and they punch people, and it's just like, okay, like, why? It's not, I mean, because if there was a circumstance like this thing shows, I mean, you're back to the Middle Ages, okay? And the women are not going to be the active ones shooting people and throwing. I mean, this is going to be like Road Warrior, freaking like Mel Gibson kind of guys, okay? This is like the biggest, strongest guys out there are going to be the ones that are going to run this. And the fact that they didn't account for that.
Wait a minute, though, Scott. So, okay, I'm going to just say something right here because I think this is what's going on. So the daughter of this guy, of course, is a mixed race black girl, right? Mm-hmm. She bites it. The female protagonist and then the badass, you know, Firefly or whatever they are, cult member, is the leader of this group, is female. Okay, right. But
and all of her major lieutenants are black females too.
Yeah, exactly. They're all dead. I think that this was just all to mollify the social justice warriors because we have no, I know, but at the start, and then we can get that out of the way and then get down to real business and let the men do the stuff. I mean, that's what I think is, you know, where we're headed. So like, because in the next episode, I mean, the survivalist is not a woman; it's a dude, and everybody.
Well, it's the two of them. It's the girl who was.
Yeah, but that's in the movie. I
can't remember what her name is, but she was the badass little kid in Game of Thrones that threw in with John Stark when he took over at Winterfell, like in whatever.
Oh, really? I didn't watch Game of Thrones after the first couple episodes.
Yeah. It's like crap. She's great. She's great in that, but she's like, I don't want to be mean, but she's funny looking.
She's an ugly kid.
Yeah, she's an ugly kid.
I mean, she's just a homely little kid. I mean, and you know, I was just like, of course she's annoying. You know, like they always have to make, you know, as if a teenager who's in the survival mode. I think the only book that I've ever read, piece of literature that has adequately portrayed the young people involved was like Les Mis, where Guy Fawkes is working with the rebels and he's like 7 or 8 years old. And they consider him an equal because anyone who survives in that situation is a complete badass and is thrown into adulthood. I am sorry. A child who's lived through the apocalypse is going to have different priorities and not act like a brat.
No. Well, I mean, you know, 15-year-old kids in the Middle Ages, which were
adults,
kind of close to the apocalyptic.
Right.
Right. They functioned as adults. They, you know, at that age, you would get married, and they would expect that you would have a kid pretty soon, and you would work a job, and like, I mean, maybe even, you know, you probably didn't have enough money to go live in your own place, but I mean, that wasn't unheard of. You know, I mean, the more primitive the society, the faster you're expected to reach adulthood.
Exactly.
Right.
This is just so great. That's the part. I'm like, don't make me. So like, I've stopped watching Walking Dead because I about two episodes in started rooting for the zombies. I'm like, I hate these people and I want them to all die painful deaths. So like in The Last of Us, at least, I'm still kind of rooting for the people, but you know, so that's the thing, you know, some of these zombie movies, like World War Z, you know, was, I thought, well done, actually, even though it was a debacle in production, but I thought it was well done. And then the one that Spencer and I, like my son, is it's the funny one that Bill Murray played a bit part dressed up as a zombie and then I'm getting shot. It was all very ironical. I can't remember the name of the movie. But anyways, it was great. Oh, Zombieland. Zombieland is fantastic. It's funny. And the thing is that they kind of deal with some of the, you know, very obvious tropes and who would survive Why? And all of this stuff.
And I'm not a big, well, I'm worn out, okay, of the post-apocalyptic genre. And I think there's a certain amount of bad faith involved in making those movies. Because if you'll remember, they got poured on super, super, super thick when George W. Bush was
Oh yeah.
president. They couldn't make enough of these movies. And it
Right.
was so obvious that Hollywood was trying to demoralize the American people
Right.
that Bush was the president because,
Hmm.
like, they still made a couple of them when Obama went in, but not that many. Like, it was like, okay, we're done. Good job. The job is finished, and now we can stop making. Now we're going to try to make some stuff to make people feel better about themselves.
Right.
But like for 8 years when Bush was the president, this was like all they made. Okay, I mean it was like,
Right.
hey, who wrote a book about the apocalypse? Because let's go make it. I mean, it didn't even have to be good. They just threw it out there.
That and war movies where Americans are the enemy. They made like three movies. I don't know if you remember during his second term in office, and all of them failed miserably. I can't remember the names
Yeah,
now.
they were all, we're the bad guys in Iraq.
We're the bad guys in Iraq. Yeah, all that.
Honestly, I hate to say it, but they were kind of sort of true in some cases, but not in the way that Hollywood portrayed it, right? I
Right.
mean,
By the way, Hollywood this last year lost 250 billion with a B dollars. Disney lost 120 billion of that.
yeah, well, I mean, and it's not that hard to see why, right?
No.
Because the product is crap. Did you notice that Top Gun Maverick got a Best Picture nomination?
Yeah, I noticed that.
I'll bet it wins
You
simply
think
because
so?
because they're in extremists. Like they've got to do first of all, they've got to do something to resurrect people's interest in the Oscars. And they keep giving the Best Picture,
Right.
award to movies that no one has seen
Right.
that like their Rotten Tomatoes score from the audience is like
Two.
70, like at best be like, yeah, it's okay,
Right.
like nobody but the critics likes these things. And so and now they've lost all this money. They're totally out of touch with the audience. They've got to do something to reconnect. And I would not be surprised if they went and threw Top Gun Maverick in there and say, look, see, like we're back, we're back in business and it's the great days of Hollywood again. Nobody's really going to believe it, but they have to do something.
You
And
know
the
what
thing of
did
it
make
is that it really is a good movie. I mean, no, it's not a good movie. It's a great movie.
right.
It's a great movie for all of the reasons that the Academy has gone away from. In that it's there to entertain you, it's there to make you feel good. It's a good story with like very solid morals to it. It doesn't like Pete Mitchell is not an anti-hero. He's a
No,
legit
he's
hero.
a legit
Right?
hero.
Hollywood
Yeah.
doesn't do like unless it's like the kick-ass girl. But other than like girl boss heroes, Hollywood does anti-heroes
Right.
who like but Pete Mitchell is like, no, I'm not an anti-hero. I'm a real hero. I
Right.
have limitations and I get scared shitless because the mission is like way too much, but I'm going to do it anyway. Right. And I'll give my life for my country. Like all of those things are not, they're not, you haven't seen that from Hollywood other than in very rare circumstances. And this thing is like back to the 1986 spirit where the first Top Gun movie came out, which was why everybody liked it so much.
Right.
Right? It's like, okay, this is what movie making is supposed to be. And it makes $1 billion. Right. And it's like, okay, if you would make movies like this all the time, your problems would end like that.
Right.
But you don't because you don't want to. And the problem
you
is
don't like America.
Yeah, well, eventually you run out of Chinese and Mexican cartel drug money to finance these movies, and you're going to have to actually make movies that make money.
Right.
Because you can't just launder drug cartel money to make all of your movies.
Well, the interesting thing is, what is else is making money? So like The Chosen, they have their own app. They put the first two for this season, they put the first two episodes in movie theaters.
Right.
Made a chunk of change. Yeah, it went great.
Yeah.
And we talked about that. Well, they're doing it again for the next two episodes. So they skipped a week so everybody could go see it in the theaters if they wanted to. Mm-hmm. And they're testing and they're making money hand over fist. And
Yeah.
so the thing is, there is a market there for good quality entertainment that families can watch. Where, guess what? Jesus Christ is the hero.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's
the
not an
ultimate
anti-hero,
hero. It's
right?
not an
It's
anti-hero.
not the, last temptation of the Christ where you're like, I don't even know if I like Jesus after you watch that movie. It's
Right.
not like that, right?
No.
Like, I mean, I know, like last time we talked about The Chosen, I said this: the guy who plays Jesus has the kindest eyes you have ever seen on a human being. It's like, it's almost like, wait, that can't even be real. That has to be
Mm-hmm.
CGI. And then you see him get interviewed, and you're like, no, he really does look like that.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, and I
Mm-hmm.
mean, the guy is he's perfect. I don't know
Yeah.
how they could have. I mean, it's divinely inspired casting, is what it
The
is.
casting throughout, like they just the guy who they cast as Judas has been cast now. I really like one of the
I like Matthew. I mean,
oh,
that
he's
guy I think is
fantastic. Yeah.
terrific, and Mary
Yeah.
Magdalene's great. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah. So
um,
like it's a
yeah,
really rich, well done cast, and if Hollywood has any sense at all, these people are going to have careers that are completely launched.
yeah, but they won't.
Yeah. Oh, I hope so, because some
But
of them are
but
really good.
having said that, they may not need to, because
Yeah.
The
It's
Chosen and
syndication.
Angel Studios has come along, and they are smashing the mold.
Yeah.
Okay. And you don't have to have some, Hollywood studio system where you have, the same 300 people who are, of sexual preferences and
Mm-hmm.
philosophical points of view that are greatly different from the rest of the public,
Mm-hmm.
making all the decisions. Like, you don't need to do that anymore.
Right.
Okay. The day is coming that like, if you go write a really good story,
Mm-hmm.
okay. And I mean, like, I'm watching this because, I got 4 novels out there that are all really good, and everybody who reads them says, man, this is terrific. And boy, should it ever be a TV series one day. Who knows? Somebody
Mm-hmm.
may want to grab the Tales of Ardinia novels. I'm just saying it doesn't have to be a Hollywood thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because we are rapidly getting to the point where there are alternative means of getting cultural content to the public.
Yeah.
And when those are fully fleshed out, and you're beginning to see I mean, to me, Angel Studios is like, that is the killer app. That's like
It
that
really
is
is.
10, 15 years from now, everything's going to look like that. And they're
Mm-hmm.
going to be some company that doesn't, they're not in Hollywood. They're in whatever, Nashville, or,
Mm-hmm.
Atlanta, or, someplace else. Okay. And they, do their thing where they are and have their own culture, that they're exporting out to the public, and totally bypassing the coastal elite and the critics.
Mm-hmm.
All of that is no longer operative anymore, and it's going to break this system, and it's going to tear down. Because Hollywood is real. I mean, when you start having an app that you can stream your content onto, and people can find it really easy, and that like that there's a funding mechanism, which in Angel Studios case is crowdfunding. I mean, people will donate money to the production,
Mm-hmm.
rather than having to buy tickets at the box office and all this other kind of stuff. But when
So
you can
they're
generate,
doing a really interesting thing, Scott. So they have split their business side. So they have a nonprofit side
right,
where all the donations that are given to that 50% go to production and 50% go to marketing. So like translation into all the different, because they want it to be in every language.
right,
And so they're really, and then they have the company side that is making money and whatever. The nonprofit side is the one who bought the ad during the Super Bowl and that sort of thing. It's an
right,
interesting thing. I think that it gives me hope that because what I love about it is it's phenomenal content. Yes,
sure,
it is traditional Christian content, but it's phenomenal. And I know that some of the actors watching it, like in Hollywood actors watching it, are gnashing their teeth because the characters are iconic and, like you say, transcendent. These people are going to be immortalized now
yeah,
in these roles. And
Yeah.
there's not too many roles like that in Hollywood. Sorry, there just aren't.
No.
And so like so him Dallas Jenkins picking these various actors and pulling many of them from obscurity and giving them the roles of lifetimes and is really just a phenomenal thing for the people and for the production staff, and they can live in Texas. So like the whole thing's in Texas, so like they can their cost of living's lower. People can have a kind of a normal life as an actor because it's going for seasons. They can move their family and have a real life.
Yeah.
And so I mean it's just beautiful and hopeful. And just when you think that that Hollywood is some juggernaut that can't be beat. Yes, it is. It can be beat, and it is
It's
being
beating
beat.
itself. It has
Yes,
been
it's
beating
beating.
itself
Yeah,
for quite a while. And what you're starting to see now is they're losing the mystique that they
yeah,
always had,
yeah.
which is, okay, these are the people who are the arbiters of our culture. Nobody really believes that anymore, right? For the same reason that nobody really believes NBC News is the arbiter
Right.
of political information anymore. And like, what do they have to do to keep alternative and independent media at bay, which is, Twitter and Facebook suppressing, everything that's not corporate media content and fact checkers and all this other crap nobody buys into that.
Right.
Nobody believes that anymore. And
Mm-hmm.
everything that happens, like, for example, this Biden Filegate business.
Right.
Okay. I mean, what little shred of credibility that the mainstream media might have had, when they just went breathless about Trump's, documents at Mar-a-Lago. And then this comes out. And anybody who thought that Mar-a-Lago was like a thing, okay, is now totally discredited. I saw a tweet, I guess it was Monday or maybe it was Sunday. Peter Strzok,
Oh
who
yeah.
is, what is he, MSNBC or CNN,
I
that
think he's
hired
on
this
CNN, but
clown to, as some sort of legal expert. And it's like, what legal expert? Like what? Like how to break the law? Like what is this guy?
oh,
Has
speaking
no.
of, did you see the FBI guy who was
Oh yeah, yeah,
investigating
yeah.
Trump's ties to
What's his name?
Russia, and he
McGonigal,
has,
I think his name is.
yeah,
Yeah.
he has
He
ties
ran
to
the
Russia.
counterintelligence FBI counterintelligence out of New York,
Mm-hmm.
and turns out he's working for what's the guy's name? Derpashenko or something like
He's
Oleg
getting paid by the Russians.
Derpashinsky or something like this. The big Russian, Putin connected Russian oligarch. That this guy was his paid flunky in the United States. Right after he's like, oh yeah, I'm doing the counterintelligence thing, and I'm going to investigate Trump and the Russians. It's like you went to work for the Russians. Like it's all a joke. All of this is a joke, and everybody understands it's a joke now because you put a joke in the White House that everybody knew was a joke, and when he starts doing joke things, okay, and it's obvious that this is like total amateur hour. It's
Mm-hmm.
hard to make. I mean, these people 6 months ago were making the case that, oh, but Joe Biden's legislative record is blah 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 blah, and it's like you haven't made anybody's life better. Okay, this is all crap. You lost an election, and your people are completely off the freaking rails. The House Minority Whip has, I don't know if it's a son who thinks he's
It's
a daughter, or if it's
it's
a
a
daughter
son.
who thinks he's a
She
son.
has a son,
Like looking
and
at the guy, it's a dude. Okay,
it's a
like
dude,
it's a dude. All right.
but he calls himself a female name. And the thing is, I'm writing about this,
And
Scott.
it's an Antifa nut. Okay.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
yeah,
like,
he was burning
so
down Atlanta.
no, 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 no. This guy was in Boston, not Atlanta. He was not. He
Oh, he
wasn't
wasn't in
in. He wasn't
Atlanta.
in with the Atlanta Antifa people. We can get to them in a second. But like this clown gets arrested, and the whole thing is just like, okay, you're the House Minority Whip.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, your job is to convince people to do the right thing, and you're the worst mother in America. Like maybe that's not a connection, but like what you've done to your kid, because clearly she did a number on that kid.
Yeah,
You don't
but
get
Tim
that screwed
Kaine,
up. What's that?
Tim Kaine, Joe Biden,
Yeah.
what's his face in New York with when his daughter got arrested, the communist mayor,
Oh yeah, yeah, De Blasio.
de Blasio's daughter. I mean, these this is a problem. So I'm writing about this because what kind of parents? I remember this one girl who was like throwing Molotov cocktails in New York City and got picked up. And her parents were both psychologists. I love this. Child psychologists in Massachusetts or something, or Connecticut. I can't remember.
A well-adjusted kid by
and their kid, and they're like, "Do you know where your child is?" Because she was like 18. She wasn't like 30, like some of these kids are. And it's like, or 50, like Hunter Biden. But I think we have a problem, and I think I know the answer. So here is I'm just looking at the YouGov poll about how Republicans versus Democrats feel about various religions. Democrats are more okay with Satanists than they are with Mormons. I'm not even kidding. And they are okay with, they really like atheists. They like atheists more than Anglicans, than Baptists, than Pentecostals, than Methodists. I'm not even kidding.
I mean, that might be a commentary on the modern Methodist church, but I'm not going to get into that.
Well, okay.
I'm not going to go there. Okay.
No, we don't have to get into. Well, the interesting thing is, Methodism is right in the middle of a breakup right now. And all the churches have until the end of this year, I think, to decide whether or not they're staying with the woke Methodists of America Church, or I think it's United Methodist, or go for the, I don't know, what is it? Worldwide Universal Methodist? I can't remember. Anyway, but our local church, which I lovingly call the Methadome, because it's got a huge dome on it. Everybody calls it the Methadome. Anybody from where I live calls it the Methadome because it sticks out.
If it wasn't Catholic, I'd say you're going to hell for that. But I guess it's a Catholic. It's okay.
Anyway, but everybody calls it that because you can see it from all angles and stuff. But they voted. These are hardcore devout Christians, and 97% of the church voted to leave the United Methodists and to stay true to Christian doctrine.
Right.
And so but this fight is happening across the country right now. It's ripped Lutheranism in half. It's ripped the Episcopal Church in half. It's ripped the Anglicans in half. This is happening.
I think the Catholic Church is going to be next.
Oh yeah. And the Baptists.
Bergoglio is, American Catholics are not going to put up with him too much longer. I think you're going to see a split. I
think so. And then you have the Baptists who have been ripped apart with CRT.
Yes.
So one way or another, Satan is ripping the churches apart in America. But what's interesting to me is this is kind of a conversation amongst center-right people, because on the left, they don't participate. No, and here's the other thing.
If it's not the black church, there's no Christians left on the left.
Well, and the thing is they hate Jews too. So regular kind of boring Judaism has a positive of +9 amongst Democrats. It's +23 among Republicans. But Orthodox Judaism is in the negative among Democrats. Big shock. Democrats don't like Jews. And we've known this, but to have the evidence of this.
Well, Orthodox Jews vote Republican.
Well, that's true. But they don't even really like mainline Jews, though. They don't really like even mainline Jews.
Yeah.
And so so you have there's all these preconceived notions. The fact that they have not that bad of a view. I mean, they have a positive view of Wiccans. Democrats do. Not a lot, but +2.
It's like 5 Wiccans, anywhere. They didn't even know what that is.
But here's the thing. I don't know if I talked about this before to all you people, or you, Scott.
It's but it's sexy chicks with tattoos, so of course I like them. It's like, what are you even talking about?
So
you don't even know what Wiccanism is. Go ask your average, dumb lefty, what do you think of Wiccanism? Oh yeah. And it's only because it's not Christianity that they like it. But they have no idea what they're talking about.
So the funniest next door conversation. Did I tell you about this ever? Okay, so the Nextdoor app is a source of endless mirth for me because I think it's the most authentic social media app out there. People are insane. So like I'm in the neighborhood where I used to live. I've since moved, but the street, not even a hop, skip, and jump, like one street over from mine, somebody had found a little altar at the end of a driveway with burnt remains of something. Well, it was the local Wiccan had offered a blessing for the neighborhood or something like that. So there's, I think at last check, there were like 1,000 different people talking. It devolved into absolute comedy. So there were people who were like, I can't believe like we have witches in the neighborhood. Oh, burn the witches. And then there was like, oh, but she's a good witch. I know her. I mean, it was the best. It was like.
Well, what did the witch have to say? Was the witch not on Nextdoor?
The witch is not on Nextdoor, which is a
Nobody
great
invited her to go on Nextdoor
to defend her honor. No, evidently not. But the whole thing, it was one of the best ever.
She's a witch. She should have known what was going on, even not being on Nextdoor.
Exactly.
Maybe her Wiccan powers and all that hot.
Yeah, she might be just a kind of bumbling, entry level Wiccan.
A brown belt witch is what she was, not a black belt.
Brown belt. Anyway, so it's still to this day my favorite Nextdoor thread ever because people were the second favorite one I'll share because this is what happens in the burbs is the discovery that upside down pineapples in your yard or somehow on your property means that you as a couple are open to swapping, if you know what I mean. Yeah. So that's the thing. So people were talking about, like, of course, people didn't know this. And someone took a picture of somebody's yard and put it up on Nextdoor because they had upside down pineapples all throughout their front yard. And they said, does anyone know why these people have pineapples in their front yard? Oh, the thread. And then people are like saying, what was the address again? like being real jokesters and just that's my second favorite.
Somebody's going to have to take an ass whipping after that.
Yeah, well, somebody might like it. I mean, you never know.
Better hope so. Otherwise, it's like going to have to apologize for quick.
But anyway, so Nextdoor every once in a while just comes home with some really great storylines, and the Wiccans are my favorite. But they are not alone. The Wiccans need to know that the Democrats are their friend. The ones that cracked me up on this list were
I gave how much quick once over, and I noticed that absolutely everybody hates the Jehovah's Witnesses.
They hate the Jehovah's Witnesses.
I mean, they hate the Jehovah's Witnesses like there's no tomorrow.
And the Universalists, Republicans really hate the Unitarians, which cracked me up.
For good reason.
They are quite possibly the most annoying. The
Unitarian Church of Politics is why. Yeah,
I mean, right. I have a story about the Unitarian Church because that's where the local bridge club is. This is what happens when you live somewhere for 25 years. You kind of get to know. Right. But there were two old ladies who were bridge partners, and they were cheaters, I tell you, cheaters. And they were Unitarians at the Unitarian Church.
Because of course they were.
They were at the Unitarian Church in the Bridge Club. Anyway, so this list, if you guys haven't seen it.
Teach, moral relativism in church, and you get it in Bridge. So that's
what you get it in Bridge. And that leads us back to the politicians with their rotten children. You can't, you're godless heathens. You think that, the earth is going to, because the minority whip lady, whatever her name is.
Catherine Clark, I think is it?
Yeah, Catherine Clark.
I never heard of her until they made her minority whip. It's like
I'd never heard of her either.
These people from the backbench and putting them in charge.
Well, she evidently is really hysterical that the world is going to end because of climate change. So this is her big thing.
Well, I just read a headline, but supposedly Cuckoo Kid, who's like the Antifa, the trans Antifa freaking mafia over here,
Hmm.
apparently was just like Greta Thunberg in that, had like a breakdown when he was 13 or something
Oh,
over climate change. And it's
right.
like, I wonder how that happened. Maybe mom put him to bed every night when he was a kid talking about how the world was going to end, and it made him cuckoo. Instead of, hey, don't worry about that. Make sure you get your math homework done and it's all going to be fine, which is
Right.
really all you want to give an 8-year-old to handle.
Right.
Um, maybe you screwed your kid up, right? And maybe
Well,
you
the
should
thing
be
is,
Congress trying to mother the entire American people when you can't even
right.
do it with the one kid you managed to have.
I do think that uh, Jordan Peterson said something yesterday, the day before, that was insightful, and he's like, "It's not whether or not you believe in God. It's just who you're going to worship.
Yeah.
You're going to believe in something."
Yeah,
And
he
so,
said that. Yeah, he said that for a while. It's like, God is one of your options, but you have no option to believe in nothing.
right, you're going to believe something. And so, like, we have on the left a lot of people believing really crazy things that make for nihilistic, hopeless outcomes. And so you have these kids engaging in terrorism because they think if they don't make the change, the world's ending. It's apocalyptic for them.
Well,
And
like you look at the numbers, particularly among Zoomers, the numbers of Generation Z people who believe that the world is going to end in the next 10 to 15 years,
yeah,
it's astronomical, the number. I mean, it's like scary. It's something like 35%.
wow.
And of course, you have this suicide rate through the sky, and you have all
Mm-hmm.
these different things. Like, and I hate to say this, but it's Generation X parents who have done really bad jobs with these kids. But it's not just that. It's harder to raise a kid now with the state of the general culture. Like when we were kids, you could park us in front of the TV,
Mm-hmm.
and like, we learned a lot, right? Like, I mean, it was kind of a positive experience to just sit there and watch TV
I
because
don't know how
most,
much I learned watching MASH and General
well, I mean,
Hospital.
look, I could probably sing you all the Schoolhouse Rock songs. Okay? I mean, like the Saturday morning cartoons and everything, like
Yeah, yeah,
the stuff that when I was like a little kid and they'd park me in front of the TV and I'd watch that stuff, it was mostly good.
yeah.
Like it was mostly good. It was when you started trying to watch the adult stuff when you're,
Mm-hmm.
13 that you
Mm-hmm.
kind of get drunk. I'm watching the Halloween movies, right? It scared the crap out of me and I got in trouble because like, you're not supposed to watch that, you dummy.
Right.
But like that was the problem is you like get scared watching a horror movie like
Yeah, that happened to me
13th
too.
and I'm 10 years old and it's like, yeah, 10-year-old shouldn't be watching that. Of course, by the
Right.
time I'm 12, it's no big deal anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But like now, what are you teaching these kids putting them in front of the television?
Right.
Right? Like they're open. I mean, Disney, which is supposed to be the gold standard of family entertainment, is nothing but woke. And I mean, it's like the groomer, Disney Network is like the groomer channel,
Right.
right? And and this isn't just a recent thing. Look at all the people that came up as child actors in these Disney things, and it turns out that they were like mortally wounded,
Yeah.
from the standpoint of their souls, and
Right.
have ended up these, horribly disfigured, characters.
Mm-hmm.
And it all started working for Disney. It's like the rot has. I mean, you want to talk about? We started off with The Last of Us and the fungus that takes over. Like that fungus has been at work at Disney for a while.
Well, and it's been at work at the culture. It's been at work in the education system. And
Yeah.
so, like,
And I think it started in the education system. It started in
yes,
the colleges really all the way back in the 80s.
and yes,
And it wasn't, so
yeah.
we've talked about this. I mean, that was something that state legislators, particularly in, Republican states, should have stepped in as soon as they started spending all this money on higher education. They should have been like hardcore riding herd on how that money was spent, and they didn't.
Yeah.
And it's like a massive, 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 unforgivable sin that the Republican establishment at the state level spent that money and fueled this monster.
I'm going to say something controversial. I think that the problem really came in when moms wholesale left the home and went to work, because the moms were involved with the school every single day. They were taking their, they were doing all of this mom stuff. They were talking to each other. They had time to pay attention.
Right.
There, and then you had no child left behind, but which forced, ironically, I hate that legislation. I hated it in real time. It was discriminatory against especially single moms because it forced homework, and it took the onus of responsibility off of the teachers to teach and pushed it home onto the parents. And so the kids who didn't have that kind of support at home were actually more harmed. So you have women in the workforce wholesale. Now these kids are alone. Now nobody's paying attention to what they're learning. By the time the mom gets home, she can't even cook. Now we have ready to eat meals. We wonder why kids are fat. Well, it's because they're not eating homemade food. Right. And then and they're so stressed because they're put in situations they are not really capable of handling, being alone or being in daycare or being in aftercare with psycho other kids. And so the cultural problems that all of this created made for, so, during COVID, in some ways, it threw us back to the 80s because moms were at home, dads were at home, they're watching what's going on in the schools again, and they're like, holy, what happened?
Yeah.
I thought I was sending my kids to school and they were getting educated. No, they're being indoctrinated. And now, there's a piece up at the American Spectator today that you all should read. And it's about basically what's happening on all these school boards where conservatives have gone in and swept out the people who were there, and what they're facing and how they're trying to deal now with the mess that is in the public schools, and basically where to start. And one of the people interviewed was talking about how she just wants kids to be able to read by third grade. I mean, because they're, all of this woke ass hattery is kind of disguising the real problems within the schools, which is that the kids are
there's
not.
There's no substance to the education.
No. So you have children who can't read, write, and do math, and but they know which gender they are. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Actually, they don't know what gender.
No, they don't know what gender they are. And so now, these are what the school boards are having to deal with.
Well, and that's, I think, over the next several years, because I'm not overly optimistic about, the conservative takeover of school boards, because I think what's going to happen is you're going to get a fresh round of left-wing money that's going to fight this off. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And generally speaking, this is too sort of meat and potatoes for the Republican donor class to sink its teeth into. And the thing about citizen activism is it tends to peter out because people are busy, right? And they have mm-hmm. other things to do. And so what you're going to see is a whole lot of these people that have just gone on these school boards are going to get discouraged.
I hope not. I mean,
well, but I think where this is going to evolve is, okay, so you now have this big wave of people going on these school boards. All right, we're gonna scrub out all this left wing crap, and initially you probably will see a lot of it go away. But when the pendulum swings back, and the money will force it to swing back, what you're going to have is a lot of people on the right are going to look at this and say, system can't be saved. Mm. And I think that's what gets us to the point where we really can get somewhere, which is we're not doing the public school thing anymore. We're doing the money follows the child thing. And
well, this week is school choice week. This is school choice week, by the way. This is school choice week. And Texas is going to change. And I can't remember, there was just a state that passed the shout out to Iowa. So I guess it was Iowa that had you guys have our producers from Iowa. You have a Republican governor, I think, and
Kim Reynolds.
Yeah,
who is
fantastic. She's fantastic, and she just passed the funding follows the child. So if we can get this in Texas, and we can get this lots of places, that upends the power locus.
You have to do that.
Yeah.
You have to do that. You have to do paycheck protection, at least for
Mm-hmm.
teachers,
Yes.
which, Florida is doing, and they are going absolutely insane in Florida over the paycheck protection bill that's moving through the legislature. But you have to do it,
You have to.
because what you have to do, if you can't reform these institutions, you have to break them. What you
Yes.
can't do, I mean, this keeps coming back to The Last of Us, right? There's this scene, okay, and I guess it's in the second episode, where they take you back to the very beginning of how this started in Indonesia, and they bring this professor at the University of Indonesia, and it's like, look, we have this, what do you think of it? And she's like, well, that's, I don't know what it is. It's like, well, it's cordyceps. And she's like, that's not possible. Like, take a look. And, so she says, okay. And they're like, well, what, we need you to make a vaccine. Says, no, there's no vaccine. There's nothing. Well, what do we do? Bomb this city. That's what she says. Bomb this city. And so, like, that's the analogy, okay? Because if you can't fix these institutions, you have to bomb them, right? And yeah, that's destructive or whatever, but this is not the same thing as The Last of Us, okay? You can actually replace these institutions with markets, particularly in education. Mm-hmm. And the minute you do that, I mean, this is the thing. Go 20 years in the future. Let's say if you pass Money Follows the Child all over the country in the next couple 2 3 years, and the kids that are going through that are now like going off to college, and they have been to whatever different choices come up, some learning pod or micro school or whatever, and it's kind of tailored to the beliefs of the folks, right? Mm-hmm. Who are like, okay, like we're going to spend the money where we think it educates our kid best, and it's not going to be some bureaucrat or some sociology major from freaking Wellesley or Tufts that's going to decide my kid's future. It's going to be us, right? And then those kids 15 years from now or whatever, like now they're looking at colleges, right? And so they go visit a school, and it's, I'm not going here. These people are nuts, right? Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden the colleges are now, they're faced with, rather than having ready-made drones that the woke public high schools and so forth are bringing to them, all of a sudden you have a very diverse educational marketplace that's bringing you students, and you have to actually be, you can't just say, okay, well, we're going to indoctrinate all these kids to be Democrats, because a whole lot of them are going to be like, no, I'm not coming to your school. We're not going to spend tuition money on woke indoctrination at the higher ed level. You're going to have to actually educate my kid.
That's already happening, by the way.
That's totally different. That's a totally different. Yeah. And at that point, people are like checking out Hillsdale and Grove City College and all these other places and saying, okay, like, what's their secret? Because they're busting at the seams while the rest of these schools are, have empty dorms, right?
The conservative Catholic schools are the University of Dallas, University of St. Thomas, University of Mary, bursting at the seams with students. And the classical schools, I'm going to give a shout out right now, because we have 2 board members putting their money where their mouth is. Bob Luddy has started a whole string of schools in North Carolina, classical schools, some secular, some Catholic, all stayed open all throughout COVID. These children continued to get educated. It was fine. Tom Tarzian is funding classical schools and funding conservative Catholic groups on college campuses. And so what's happening is that already parents are going, wait a minute, we're not going to invest all of this into our kids growing up and then sending them to a college and have crap dumped into their head. And so just like everything, there's starting to be competition. And the problem for these big schools who've been so woke, like if you are accepting, what's his name from Florida who got into Harvard and he's just stupid. He couldn't even get into the local, when the school got shot up. What's his name?
David.
David Hogg.
Yeah. Hogg.
Yeah. Okay. So that kid, so he couldn't even get into like the local community college. Like that's how dumb he is, but he got into Harvard. And so the schools are filled with these type of people, either legacies or affirmative action, or kids like David Hogg who have no business being in a school
because they have some sort of
notoriety or whatever. Meanwhile, the actual legit good students, and this is what I'm seeing over and over. Like I saw this with one group of one of my kids. They were all a couple national merit scholars. They got into, they got either scholarship or got scholarship. Once they got into the system, the schools couldn't like overtly, help them, but then help them. Now, in the national merit scholar cases, some of them got full rides. But the point being is that the Ivies didn't want anything to do with them, even though they're supremely qualified.
Right.
Because they're letting these woke idiots in. Right. Well, what's starting to happen is you're starting to get this power balance change in higher ed where the best and the brightest aren't going to these big name schools.
Well, I mean, right. And that's
it's already happening what you described.
Which is to say, well, okay, because your school has gone down. Like your school's not good.
Right.
I mean, your student body is not more talented than other people. They may be more connected, but they're not more talented.
Right.
They don't produce the kind of scholarship that they used to. They don't produce the kind of scholarship that, whatever a Hillsdale might, or whatever, whatever the best
fill in the blank state school that is, actually pulling people based on merit.
Right. And I mean, so ultimately that can't sustain.
Right.
And look, you can kind of blow this up to like the 30,000 foot, big picture level. And it's every one of these systems, okay, whether it's a communist system or whether it's a, sort of a fascist corporatist, any kind of centrally controlled system that's not based on both merit and, I don't want to say natural law, but like objective criterion that drive the evaluation of things. All of that gets corrupted when you have too few people making too many decisions. And everything that the left does, whether it's in the culture or the economic sphere or the political sphere, it's all building that pyramid so that at the very top you have a group of people that they select are, their command filters down all the way down the pyramid. And you see this in everything, in the legacy corporate media. You see it in Hollywood. You see it in the universities. You see it in government bureaucracies. You see all of these different places where it's all trying to sort this thing into this very strict hierarchical control structure, and it doesn't perform. Okay, like go everywhere and look at this, and over time, it never performs because it stifles innovation and it stifles effort. Because if you're at the bottom of the pyramid, you're going to stay there really no matter what you do. It's not, most of these systems are not meritocratic, okay, other than a very small number of people who are selected from above, and not necessarily because they're any good at their jobs.
Right.
In all of these systems, the best way to do this is to find a mentor who pulls you up and be, ride in their slipstream as they kiss butt on their way to the top. All right.
Right.
It's very seldom the guy thinks differently and says, no, let's do it like this. And his way is like definitely better. They crush that guy. All right. But the problem is that society is now too big and too competitive and too integrated in that, somebody could be a social media superstar that, like gets a big YouTube following and makes a really good living. Okay. Without the corporate media structure finding them and groom them and give them a show or whatever. Like there's too many, Steven Crowders out there. I'm using him because his name has come up. But I mean, that's a guy who on YouTube has built a thing, and then he went to the Blaze, and he's got a big audience, and he's probably going to do his own platform basically to run his deal because he didn't like the offer that the Daily Wire made him when he decided to leave the Blaze. But the point is that his deal is pretty much organic. Like Steven Crowder built his own brand. Like he didn't have, he didn't get some job at NBC or some cable channel or whatever that turned him into somebody. He made it on his own. And he could launch his own platform and maybe not make as much as the Daily Wire is giving him, but certainly, he can launch his own service. And I mean, the Daily Wire was an example of, I mean, these were a bunch of guys that were not corporate backed. They got some investor money that came in, but they started a thing from scratch. Like, it wasn't a corporate media thing. And so you're starting, we talked about Angel Studios, which is a perfect example of how this is. And you're going to see this all over the place. I think it's a matter of time. All it really requires is a little bit of help from Republicans in state legislatures, and you're going to see education bust out of this, this pyramidal hierarchical structure that the teachers unions and the bureaucrats and everybody else has kind of put together that doesn't work.
Yeah.
I've seen this coming for a long time. I'm actually surprised it hasn't happened. One of the things I'm talking about in the Obama book was that Barack Obama might as well have been Benito Mussolini, in terms of the guy was a fascist corporatist. And there's in Ed Klein's book, The Amateur, he talks about this dinner that right after Obama got elected, or inaugurated rather, he brought all of these historians, Michael Beschloss, Doris Kearns Goodwin, so forth, all these left-wing historians, and he brings them to dinner at the White House, and they're going to have this whole thing. And basically what he was fishing for is, hey, what do I got to do so that you guys will write me up as some great president, right?
Right.
And that was the thing. But, according to Klein, at this dinner, he basically comes out and says, what I like is a corporatist America. Like, I like that hierarchical structure where we're going to get government together with the big players in each of these economic sectors, and we're going to restructure the economy along those lines. And of course, Klein's deal is he's Obama's an incompetent. And I disagree completely, because if you look at the American economy, even after 4 years of Trump trying to reopen it, the American economy is very much that hierarchical, corporate driven, cronyistic, state capitalist type structure. Even though it's pretty clear it doesn't work, right? Like, this is how you get a sclerotic economy, and China takes everything over because there's not enough innovation. It's not fun enough to go start a small business and grow it up big. I mean, you get it to a certain level, and then somebody buys you out, and you take the money and go play golf or hang out on a beach, because it's too much trouble to try to build a mid-sized company into a Fortune 500 company. It's almost impossible to do now. And that's Obama. Like, it was moving that way to some extent before he came in. He turbocharged it. He made it almost impossible. And every year he was president, and I knew this at the time and I'd forgotten all about it, but every year Obama was president, there were fewer businesses extant in America than the year before. For 8 years solid, that trend line went straight down.
That was the goal, though, to get rid to the. And the thing is, we can see what happened in California and New York, and they're talking about in California. I love this. I hope they do it. A billionaire tax of 1.5% per year.
Yeah.
And also that they want to tax. And so anybody who might leave to get away from it, that they want to follow the people where they move, kind of like the federal government does when you, if you take a job overseas and move to another state, that they can still tax you for a certain number of years.
What makes you think that ever could be enforceable?
Well, and so the interesting thing with this is, there was an article, Carol Markowitz was writing about this, about saying that kind of the stage play, They'll Be Back, that a New York writer was saying, all those people moved to Florida, they'll be back.
Right.
And it's don't think so. No, they're not going to be back. And the people who moved to Texas from California, no, they're not moving back. Because all of these people have been propagandized, like the people in New York and people in California. And so they have certain beliefs about themselves and about the state they're in. And then they go and they move somewhere kind of on faith, because they're sick of what is. And then they find out, wait a minute, we've been lied to. This is pretty great. And so I think that they're not coming back. And all of the decisions that New York and California in particular, New Jersey, Illinois made, that just caused the people to flee, they're indeed due to now, because they've lost a lot of wealthy people and middle-class people who pay taxes.
I love that series of skits that the Babylon Bee did about the couple from California who moved to Texas, and they're
I've
like
only seen one, I think.
they're like the really crunchy woke Californians, right?
Mhm.
And they moved to Texas and they can't understand like why the neighbors are all so friendly. And the guy goes, "Oh well, you know, let's y'all come down to the barbecue, right?" Like, you know, and she's like appalled, like, "Those are animals you're cooking on the grill," and the husband's kind of like, "That smells pretty good, right?" Like, so like they totally convert him into Texan. He's like conflicted about it because it drives his wife nuts. And then they go to Buc-ee's.
Oh,
And
yeah.
like the minute they go to Buc-ee's, it's like, oh yeah, it's over. These people are going to be Texans forever.
Yeah, exactly.
It's hysterical. I think it's 4 or 5 of them, and it's, you know, it's kind of like their progression from, you know, totally out of place like woke Californians to like almost Texans. And you know, but the thing is, it's like really funny because it's true, right? I mean, you know, to a large extent, you're the product of your environment. And if your environment becomes different, it will change your attitude. And, you know, and the thing of it is that you're getting this great sorting. And the big, you know, threat and concern and worry that everybody has, like in a Texas or a Florida, is, oh my God, you know, these people are going to come down here and they're going to change our politics or whatever. But if you go back to like Texas in 2018, and the Cruz Beto O'Rourke election, okay, if it wasn't for Californians moving to Texas, Ted Cruz would have lost that race because those people voted heavily for Cruz because they looked at Beto O'Rourke and were like, oh, we know all about that guy, right? Like we've had a succession of people just like that as governor of California, and they wanted no part of Beto O'Rourke. And it was actually, you know, it was you know, native Texans that propped him up.
Suburbanite women.
Yeah, it was the suburban Karens, and to a large extent, it was the Latino vote because they thought he was Latino.
Right.
My name's Beto, and they're like, oh, he must be Mexican, and it, like he fell off every time he would run. It was like, yeah, I actually found out that you lied to me.
Right.
that you're actually Irish and white as can be, and come from money, right? And you
from New England.
You call yourself Beto is because that's what the maid called you. Right. And they're like, oh, why didn't I know that back in 2018? And so now he's done.
Right.
Right. But I mean, the point was the Californians who just got there, like they saw through that guy right away because they like, oh, this is every politician in California.
Right.
And the people from Texas thought he was something new. Right. Because previous to him, like they didn't run people like that. Right. They would run Ann Richards, right? And it was like, oh, okay, so like but this guy comes along and he's like something a little different, and they like, oh, well, he's, you know, he's the Mexican Barack Obama. He's like, well, he's not Mexican, and he's definitely not Obama, but his politics are similar, and like they didn't quite get it, right? Because it was something different, and then of course, you know, he's a declining asset because the more people get to know who he is, the more they realize how full of shit he is. But the people from California knew right away because they had been, they were inoculated. They were exposed to it. They already knew what they had, and there was no selling them on any kind of Beto O'Rourke. So I'm not sure that all these people moving from Illinois or New York or California or you know, these blue states, I don't think those people are per se a liability if you're
I don't think so,
because I think more of them are Republicans than Democrats. Now when you get to the point where you're hardcore cleaning those states out and it's the second or third wave of people, the true economic refugees, that could be where you start getting the lefties come. And what you have to do the minute that those people show up and start protesting things, like, you know, to the old school, you know, like take them to the state line and get, you know. Like,
well, the thing is that I say there's certain laws that passed to make it so that liberals under no circumstances want to be here. For example, Texas has a fairly draconian abortion law.
Right.
And there have been liberals saying, I'm moving out. And I say, good riddance to you. See you later. Go
you realize that's exactly what we passed this bill for, right? It's to run you off.
Yeah.
Like, we don't want you here.
Yeah.
Like that. That's like,
Yeah.
no, I mean, that's great. Like those are the kinds of things that, this takes Republicans thinking a little bit like Democrats, because Democrats have known for a very long time how to run us out of a city, for example.
Right.
Like, they've known this for a long time, right? The minute we're going to pass a human rights commission to make sure that you're not discriminating against trans people in your business. And this guy says, my businesses move into Williamson County, right? Because I ain't doing business in a place that wants to fine me $100,000 because I didn't want a guy in a dress selling Ford pickup trucks at my dealership.
Right.
Like, done, gone. And they were like, good, we don't want that guy because we don't want him involved in local politics with money that he's done or whatever. Like, we want him gone. Let's get him out of here. And that tax base we can replace by drawing down from the federal government. This is me talking about, weaponized governmental failure that I talk about all the time, but it's real. So what you need to do is a little bit of weaponized governmental failure at the state level. If you're a red
weaponized governmental success.
Well, okay, but it's, in other words, failure from a left-wing state. Oh, you made your state not worth living.
Inhospitable. Yeah.
Like, for example, here's some advice for the Georgia legislature. You need to come up with the most draconian, I mean, hardcore, offensively draconian, anti-Antifa bill that you can pass.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, go hardcore on this. Like, you get 25 to life if you set fire to a cop car. Okay. Like, we will put you in prison for life if you set a cop car on fire.
Right.
Or if you engage in, a riot and somebody gets killed, you're now a principal to murder or whatever, and make it so that all of these rich assholes mostly not from Georgia,
right?
Because I don't know, like it's been given zero play in the media, but Antifa has built an autonomous zone in Atlanta. Right. Nobody knows this. Okay, just like what was it, Chaz in Seattle? They've done that same shit in Atlanta. And it is being covered not at all. I didn't even know about it until this morning.
And CNN, for everybody's information, is in Atlanta. That's
well, for now, CNN's pulling out of downtown Atlanta.
Well, I know, but I'm just saying that it's not for lack of coverage.
Right. They don't. Well, I mean, like, they're not reporting this kinds of stuff.
Right.
I mean, it's just not made it into the mainstream media. And it's not because it's happening in East Jesus somewhere. This is in freaking downtown Atlanta that this is.
Right.
Okay. They're destroying the city. So much so that the left-wing Black Democrat mayor of Atlanta is like throwing a fit about this. And I mean, Keisha Bottoms, who was the mayor of that place before, was happy to let it burn. And this guy's like, wait, whoa, there's nothing left. You guys can't do this. So, I mean, this is actually a thing, but, I mean, they're burning stuff down and they're doing all this stuff in Atlanta. And these same morons who are reporting this, MSNBC, I think the guy was, mostly peaceful demonstration with a burning cop car in the back, and like 4 people got taken to the hospital. Right. Mostly peaceful. And it's like, Jesus, you did that in 2020 and you made an ass of yourself then. And now you're doing it again. And it's like, well, and like I said, I found out about this reading this morning, which we're recording this on Tuesday. Stephen Green at PJ Media had like a whole thing about it. It's really, really well written. And he's like, this is not a redux of 2020. This is a preview of 2024.
Yes. Yep.
And he's right, because if this is not cracked down on hard, like to the point where these people are scared that it will be the end of their lives, either literally or figuratively, if they engage in this stuff, because these are all privileged freaking brat kids, just like the moron in Boston whose mom is the Democrat House Minority Whip. That's who these people are. They are creatures of comfort. And when you start making them really uncomfortable, they probably change their politics, because all of them are 23 years old and got some worthless degree from some super expensive college, or dropped out of school because they thought it was oppressive. all right? And rather than go get a real job, they go hang out at the Atlanta Autonomous Antifa Zone, all right? You got to crack down on that. I mean, Brian Kemp's the governor of Georgia, just got a huge, just got reelected. I mean, Brian Kemp is
he's let it go this far.
Whatever he wants to do to these people, okay?
I know, but he hasn't though.
I know. Well, that's what I'm saying. Brian Kemp could make himself a star right now, going to that legislature and saying, "Give me a bill, and I will bring the state police. I will crush this." Okay. And honestly, you should, because it will only metastasize. Right. All right. And you've already seen what these people have done. Have you been to Atlanta lately?
Atlanta's it's been a couple of years since I've been to Atlanta.
Atlanta's a mess. Okay. It's a mess. I mean, CNN pulling out of downtown Atlanta.
That's crazy. I didn't know that.
They're not alone. Downtown Atlanta is starting to become a ghost town. All right.
That's too bad. Atlanta is one of the really nice southern city.
Controversy about Buckhead trying to become its own independent city, and it's because the police are non-existent, and these people all have nice stuff. And I mean, these people are practically coming to loot their houses. You talk about the suburban women that want to vote Democrat. Well, you can't jog on the streets of your neighborhood because somebody will jump out of a car and beat the hell out of you to take your freaking iPod. I mean, like that, like literally how bad it is. And something's got to be done.
Kemp could do something. He could have done something. He's not doing anything. We'll see.
This is the win. You come in and you say, okay, that's not going to happen in my state that I govern. All right. And we're going to get the legislature to pass laws to crack down on this stuff and make it so that if you want to, this is the FAFO regime that you're going to put in. It's F around and find out. Okay. All right, fine. We're going to make it so that we're going to call in the National Guard and we'll start shooting rubber bullets. But if you guys want to have a real live insurrection, we're going to show Nancy Pelosi how it's done.
I don't see it happening in Georgia.
No, I'm not saying, not with Brian Kemp, but what I'm saying is the opportunity is there.
Oh, yeah, sure. The opportunity is there. I mean, the one thing is, I will say this about Abbott here in Texas, because they had this problem with, the local Austin government, they're, passed this law that lets vagrants lay in front. And so they had in front of the Capitol all over, it was ruining downtown. Yep. And Abbott was like, no. And so like they're using state level stuff to keep the riffraff in check. But you want to ruin a city, that's the way you do it. And then nobody comes. It's really too bad about Atlanta because it's a beautiful, if you haven't been there, it's like rolling hills. Atlanta's a really nice town.
Everything like north of Atlanta, like north of Atlanta. You start getting into mountains.
It's beautiful.
We have some family friends that live. I can't even pronounce the place that they live, but it's up, like Cleveland, Georgia, and all areas up in there. And I mean, it's all mountains and whatnot. And I mean, they have wineries north of Atlanta, and they make pretty good wine. And you want to talk about a cool place to go hang out? It's like some of these it's just like going to Napa where, you're going to the winery and there's like a restaurant and you do like your whole thing. These are all like on the side of a mountain and you can see to South Carolina.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic over there. I mean, it really, really, it's all very small towns and this kind of thing, but it's just cool. And there's so much money has moved over there. It's not
it's crazy.
It's amazing.
Okay. We are way over time, Scott. I think that we've gone from, so here, I think the lesson of today's podcast, the theme is do not let the leftist fungus overtake your brain.
That's right.
And overtake your town, your school board, your city. You have to.
I think the title of this is going to be "There's a fungus among us."
There's a fungus among us, and it
has to be. It has to be. I've been waiting to use that for something for so long. It finally came down on something.
There is a fungus among us, and it needs to be rooted out. And if necessary, bomb it.
Yes.
And that's the message. We look forward to your book on Barack Obama. And of course, everybody can
don't
buy
ask me
your
what the title is, because we don't have it. We've got like 6 titles that we like but don't love, and so we've been kicking around titles for a month, and it's been a pain. But we'll come up with something. But it should be really good. It's going to be important, I think, because it's going to sort of put a bow on like how we got here. Because over the last 15 years, this is such a different country than it was in 2007.
And it's Barack Obama. I mean, there's no question that the roots are there, and 15 years has been enough time to get kids through the educational system, for everything to be fundamental. You know, when he talked about hope and change, and there was more change than it was kind of hopeless and change. That's change right. Came, and whether people want to acknowledge it or not, all of Biden's people are Obama's people. Obama is running this administration now. And
well, in fact, my latest American Spectator column talks about Ron Klain.
Yeah.
Who's Biden's brain. Like that's what they called him, was Biden's brain. And he'd been, with Biden for a while, but he was also a very significant Obama flunky. And Ron Klain absolutely personifies the corruption of the elite in this country. And I didn't have a chance to really do much about him when he got the job, because we were too busy talking about how Team Biden went into office and how destructive that election was. But on his way out, we can really analyze, like, okay, this guy's legacy as a public servant, right?
John McCain called him the dumbest man in politics, and that's John McCain speaking. So that tells you something. Even he didn't like him. So I mean, it's just like
Well, in my piece, and I will close with this. In my piece, I have a YouTube video, and it's a clip of Kevin Spacey, who played Ron Klain in the HBO movie The Recount about Florida, right? Where if you remember, Ron Klain was the guy in charge of the recount committee, where they were like, no, we're going to keep counting votes until Gore wins. All right. Which, everybody thought that was nuts until it became basically standard operating procedure.
It worked in Minnesota for them.
Yes. Right. That was later, but yes.
Right.
But that started with Ron Klain.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah. But anyway, Kevin Spacey interviews him, right, for this thing, or they're back and forth having a conversation. And it's like, so who's creepier among these two guys?
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, yeah. And but we're governed by people who suck, and we know that. But the point is, and like we've talked about in this podcast, there are lots of green shoots out there. And I think those are the things that we should be focusing on, because most of them are scalable, right? Yes. Things that are successfully done at the state level can be done at the national level, because at the end of the day, that's multiple states. And even if you can't do it at a national level, do it everywhere you can. Yeah. And we're starting to see it in the culture. We're not seeing it in economics yet, but I think maybe that can come. And we're definitely starting to see it in the political sphere as well. So again, I'm finding ways to be hopeful.
Good. Well, and with that, all of you, thank you for listening and watching. Please like us, share us, subscribe to us. If we get booted, I don't see how we could get booted off of YouTube for this one. I don't think so. No. But if we do, you can find us at Rumble, Spotify, everywhere. So please, whatever platform you like, one of our readers / listeners, shout out, use a platform I had never heard of and was having trouble. It's how he listens to all his podcasts. And anyway, it's all working now. So pretty much anywhere you can find us, it works. So thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week, being our usual chipper selves. Thanks, everybody.
See you guys.